Welcome everyone to 10 most common mistakes made in bath design. My name is Lisa Millard. I am with National Kitchen and Bath. I am one of their course developers. And I welcome you all to this webinar. This is our first free series of the year. And for everyone that is attending today, you will be earning 0.1 CEU credits for this course. So we really appreciate your attendance, and after this session I will be providing everyone with a survey. So if you would please take some time to fill that out. We'd like to continue with these free webinars, so your input is very much appreciated. With that said, I'd like to start with using some of the tools in Blackboard. And first, if everyone can check their audio, there is a little microphone at the top of your screen listed next to the audio and video with a little red gear. If you would just check that and make sure that your audio is clear and that you're able to hear. Also, we'll be using a few tools today, probably not many because it's such a large class. But the first tool that we'll be using is under the participants drop-down. There is a smiley face, an away symbol, a hand, and then right next to that there is a green check mark, or it may be black and white on your screen. Those will be answered for questions that David may be asking throughout the course. So if you would please respond using the green check mark, either yes or no, and that check mark will also turn into an ABCD polling type throughout the session. Other than that, I'd like to get started and introduce our facilitator. David Newton has been with us for a good many years. He is a certified master kitchen and bath designer, and his knowledge will hopefully bring you to the next level in your career. And please welcome David.
Thank you very much, Lisa. I noticed the first question I got, it was from somebody that is out of the past there. The hand went away real quick, so I assume there's not going to be a question there, but I do see some old-timers on here, and I see some folks that have attended the class fairly recently. We're certainly glad to have you, and please let us know at the end of this if there are other programs that you'd like to see us present to you. I want to get started with the 10 most common mistakes made in bath design. Now, probably about 20 years ago, we did this program in Vancouver, BC for a joint chapter meeting for all of the chapters on the western part of North America. And I can assure you that many of the mistakes have changed, but nevertheless, we still have some mistakes that are being made. So let's get into these. And by the way, some of these haven't changed, so I think you'll see that. If you do have a question after this, again, we only have 1 hour for the presentation. There is my email address, dnatrain. I'm at AOL.com. And there is my phone number if you'd like to get in touch with me. And certainly in the subject line of any email, if you'll let me know what the subject is so I'm sure it's not spam. You know, too often I'll get an email that says, you've got to see this, and when I click on it, I realize maybe I really didn't need to see that. I got to go wash my eyes out or something, you know. So I'm pretty selective in what I open now. So in the subject line, just give me a hint that it has something to do with our industry. The objectives, of course, for the program today would be the fact that quite often we make mistakes. We make the same mistake over and over and over again. Unfortunately, it's near the end of the project, possibly. We fix it, and then we repeat it again. We just don't understand how we made that mistake. Sometimes it's easier to fix than it is to try to go back and research why it happened. But over a period of time, we need to eliminate that. So I'm going to show you some mistakes that are repeated over and over again. So how did I get the information? Well, I did a survey out to decorative plumbing and hardware dealers as well as plumbing wholesalers, and I want to thank them for their contribution. Some of you may be listening to the presentation today, and I do appreciate your help. Too numerous to mention, but I do appreciate the information. Got a question, first of all. Let's see what the question might be. I'll wait for that. We have started. If you cannot hear me, then obviously you do have a problem. And the learning moderator is taking care of that for me, so I'll continue on then. The 10 common mistakes, and we'll cover these in detail this afternoon, would be the professionals working with professionals. Too often we think we can do things ourselves, even with the vast knowledge that we have available through certification. There's so many new things. One tip was to certainly order early, and we'll talk about that and why that's important. Custom showers. There's so many things today with custom showers that we need to take care of, because this can be a very expensive mistake to clean up. Increasing drain showers. We'll get into that. Multiple shower heads. Of course, one plays on the other. You have more shower heads, you need to have a bigger shower drain. The shower valves themselves, and some tips here that some of the decorative plumbing and wholesale manufacturer, plumbing wholesalers told me about, didn't even think about. Bathtub issues, toilet issues, and sink issues, because some of these, there's just simply more than one problem. As far as the faucet issues and finishes, we combine them because the finishes will actually get into other parts of this, so I think you'll see that it makes sense to just throw it into the faucets at that point. Let's start with the first one. A lot of the people that responded to my survey mentioned to me that, quite honestly, it is very difficult for a kitchen and bath designer to know everything about everything. We just can't today. There's so much thrown at us that and things are changing so quickly. So ask for help. NKBA has decorative plumbing and hardware dealers, plumbing wholesalers, even plumbers. Look for their help. And another thing, don't rely on the consumer to share information with the builder or remodeler. Now here's a tip from Erin Carlson, one of the people that supplied the information to me from Falk Supply. She says, first and most importantly, work with licensed plumbers and a plumbing professional when selecting your plumbing materials. You see, that's their job. They're up to date on the latest things, so working with a professional will help ensure that your product runs smoothly, because they'll know the items you need to have, or even the things you haven't even thought about, and that happens a lot. Additionally, they generally have a relationship with a plumber or contractor on the job. So there are open lines of communication, so there's no confusion about what products have been selected for what job. Excellent tip. Now, I went on to the NKBA website under the Ask a Pro question, and I noticed that in the New York City area, obviously one of the biggest concentration of kitchen and bath dealers and related businesses, did a 30-mile search, and I found that there are 23 decorative plumbing hardware retailers that we can go to for help. So this is on the NKBA website. If you're not familiar with some of these in your area, just type in your zip code and the information will come up. In this particular case, it's showing specifically the category of decorative plumbing retailers, and the closest one there is right on Madison Avenue to just a search for New York City. So they're there, they're ready to help you. But in addition to that, of course, what we just talked about would be the NKBA decorative plumbing hardware dealers. But in addition to that, manufacturers will have their own certified plumbers. That's pretty handy. It would be kind of like trying to get a countertop maybe from someone that dabbles in solid surfacing rather than dealing with a licensed fabricator from that solid surface manufacturer. We know we're going to get the best when we deal directly with the company and their certified dealers. Hopefully, many of those are NKBA members also. And then, of course, then your local plumber. I thought this was kind of interesting. Plumbers, I think this is from England, if I'm not mistaken. But nice idea. In the other part of this, with professionals working with professionals, sometimes we have to figure out who our customer is. Now, if a builder calls me and tells me that they have a house under construction, they want to talk to me about the bathrooms, there's no question that the builder is my customer. But many times we work directly with the consumer. So when we work with a consumer, that information then is passed on to the consumer. And in this case, you can see I've got a lot of information I've given the consumer and things they need to pass on to their contractor, remodeler, or whoever they might be working with. The problem is they're not a professional. In fact, haven't you found that the bigger the job, the less time the consumer has to deal with it? Because they're busy doing a lot of other things that made them wealthy enough to be able to afford the job that you're doing for them in the first place. So that information doesn't get directly to the contractor, remodeler, or whoever that person might be. And then things like changing maybe the location of the toilet, moving it over just a little bit. The concrete pad has not even been poured for this particular lot. We've already changed the toilet. No problem if the concrete's not paid, but if that doesn't get to the contractor, we have a problem. So what I tried to do is I tried to ask the consumer, the homeowner, if it would be all right if I worked directly with the contractor. And if they trust you for the job, they should trust you to work directly with the contractor. Not only trust you, but I think they would also really welcome that opportunity for you to take that load off of them. So what we have then is direct line of communication. All the information I need passed on to the contractor, I know gets to the contractor. Now it's up to me to do my job. The next issue that and by the way, these are not in any particular order of the top 10. These are just listed separately, no particular order. Number 2, order early. Some custom products have a long lead time. In fact, the more expensive it is, the more likely it has a longer lead time. And many of the large fixtures have to be placed in the home during the framing process. Well, it's fortunate that it takes longer to build a custom home than it would be then a spec house. So we know the products that would go in a spec house are probably available and can be delivered almost any time. It's the more complex items that take a little longer that would go into the custom homes. One thing we don't want to ever see on a delivery tag is the words back ordered. That can slow the entire process down. Now, to the left, we see probably a tub shower unit that would be stocked at a home center, plumbing supply wholesaler. It's ready to go. They have these in the lefts and rights. No problem at all here. We can get these at the last minute. Probably go out and pick them up in a truck and bring them back and put them in the minute we need to put it in the house. After all, you see here it goes from stud to stud. So it goes in very early. But to the right, we see a very elaborate platform tub installation. Everything has to be sized perfectly for the tub. The depth of this, the width, everything has to be perfect. So that's the communication I'm talking about that needs to go directly to the builder so that when this tub comes in, it will fit in here perfectly. Now, I know some of you are thinking, it looks to me like that has steps on a bathtub. Isn't that a violation of the NKBA bath planning guidelines? Well, we don't recommend steps. But I want you to notice, if you will, that this is a slight rise. This is a much higher rise. So basically with this high bathtub, it'll be much easier for the consumer to sit on the edge at this level and swing their feet into the bathtub. So that's why it's not recommended, and we like to see a grab bar in the final installation. But this is certainly acceptable, and I think probably the reason for it justifies then that rise. But it would be difficult for the person to step on this level directly into that bathtub. Number 3, custom showers. Oh, we had a lot of problems with custom showers. So let's get started with it. First of all, you may need to increase the supply of or increase the size of the water supply lines. Then you have to do a little math. Verify the maximum water flow. Check your shower heads. They vary between 2.5 to 2.2 gallons per minute. Then, of course, how many do you have running at one time? Body sprays, again, 2.2, 2.5. Now, these are the more common averages. You may find some that are a little less, a little more. But we have to factor these in. Now, what happens then with all of this water coming out at one time, because we might have 6 body sprays, 2 shower heads going at one time. So with all this water going out, the water heater may need to be resized. In the last part of this, we want to talk just a little bit about the consumer again, working directly with the consumer. They may want to do a lot of the work themselves. They may say, well, I'll measure my shower door, I'll bring it in if you'll make it for me. And we'll talk about why that's not necessarily a good idea. Now, we know for a long time, and those of you that have taken the introduction to bath design, or prior to that, a bath starter, you probably learned that if you have 3 or more fixtures, you need a 3/4 inch water line going to those fixtures. So in a typical bathroom group, we'd have a 3/4 inch line going into that bathroom group. However, once we hit that first fixture, it's very possible that the water line can drop. It could drop to a 1/2 inch, because plumbers know that 2 or 1 to 2 fixtures, unless there's something unique about it, require a 1/2 inch water line. Now, if any of you live near the New York City area, you may be familiar with the fact that some of the toilets in that area actually use a 1-inch water line, flush valve toilets. But this is the most common dimension that we see throughout the United States and into Canada, is 3/4 for 3 or more fixtures, 1/2 inch water line for 1 to 2 fixtures. So here's how it boils down. You'll notice we have a 3/4 inch water line coming into the bathroom group from another area as it comes into this group. Now, this is a traditional distribution system, not a manifold distribution system. And of course, I'm only showing one water line, but I think you'd understand we have a hot and a cold coming in. So we have 3/4 inch water lines coming in. As soon as we hit the first fixture, unless this requires a supply line greater than 1/2 inch, or the bathtub requires something greater than 1/2 inch, the plumber may change to 1/2 inch water line. I mean, after all, you may be paying the plumber per fixture. And if you're paying the plumber per fixture, they're doing all the rough-in. They're paying for the rough-in material. Then they'll come back and they'll do the final connection of everything once all of the wall material is up. So if they're paying for the material, changing from a 3/4 inch water line to a 1/2 inch water line doesn't sound like a big deal to you, but day in and day out, 3 bathrooms in one house and a kitchen, you're going to save a little bit of money by reducing that pipe size. But the problem is, and again, I'm using a very small bath here, but what happens if we decide to turn this into a custom shower, or we decide to upgrade the filler to a 3/4 inch tub valve? If we do, we've got a problem. We'll not get the water we need through a 1/2 inch water line. So you sold a very expensive filler, and it's going to fill the tub at the same rate, or provide water into the shower is the same rate as that 1/2 inch water line did to start with. Here's a good example of that. Now, this is an older home. In fact, I was raised in this house, and when I took possession of the house, we made some major changes to the house. One of the first things that I noticed is that these galvanized pipes, of course, they had to be replaced. We took care of that. But if you'll notice, the reduction in pipe size from 3/4 to 1/2 inch. At the time that I took possession of this house, we had a 1/2 inch water line going to 4 fixtures in that home. Now, eventually, we were going to add a closed washer beyond this point, so we'd have 5 fixtures on a 1/2 inch water line. So what we had to do, obviously, is go back to the source of the 1/2 inch water line and upgrade it to 3/4 of an inch. And of course, then with the 3 or more fixtures, we were fine with that. So this is exactly what I'm talking about, and these are the things you need to look for on your projects if you're making that upgrade. So keep that 1 to 2 1/2 inch, 3 or more, we need 3/4 inch. Now let's talk about meeting the hot water demands. We've added a bathroom. We don't know if this bathroom is going to be able to create a problem with the existing water heater. Today, a good addition might be to simply put in an on-demand water heater. They, of course, are rated in gallons per minute. So we might think on the surface that we'll simply get one around 3 gallons per minute because, after all, one shower head and the toilet doesn't take any hot water. And what water we're using here, we're certainly not going to use more than 3 gallons per minute. So one that would be rated at 3 to 4, we'd probably be okay. But let's go back to changing this to body sprays and other water delivery fittings that we'd have in this home. This on-demand may simply not work for us. And again, they are rated in gallons per minute. We can see this one is 5, but keep in mind, 2 shower heads, and you have this one at its limit. 2 people taking a shower at the same time, you have it at its limit. Now, of course, a little flex built into it, I'm sure. What's the chance that 2 people are going to be taking a shower at exactly the same time? Now, remember, there's no stored water here, so we're kind of pushing it to the limit. You add a body spray, and this will not work at that point. And generally, we're not going to add 1 body spray. So we may need to think about the size of that on-demand or tankless water heater. Now, the final part of the custom shower is the taking dimensions from consumers. Over to the left in the circled area, this is a picture that was sent to me by a consumer. One of the things that I do for NKBA is answer or determine who is the best person to answer the Ask a Pro questions. This came in. The consumer said that they were a little concerned about this little curved portion. They asked the fabricator. They said that that was there so that if the glass slipped, the glass wouldn't crack. Well, I took the photograph to a local shower enclosure dealer. They looked this hinge up on the internet, looked for the particular the cut, what was supposed to be cut for the actual hinge, and this was off by about 1/2 to 3/4 the distance you see here. So now the consumer was dealing with, is this the right thing? Well, I certainly hope an NKBA member didn't provide that shower door, because I had to tell a consumer that that was not the right cut for that particular hinge. So these are the things we run into. You take the wrong dimension, now you're responsible for that door. We don't want that to happen. So be very careful with consumer measurements. Number 4, this has to do with shower drains primarily, but increasing drain sizes. And the points we're going to cover are shower drain sizes may need to be increased. Now, once we increase the shower drain size, then we may get into a problem where we have to reroute the pipe because now the pipe is too big for the construction restraints that are within the home. And finally, you want to be sure that you match the drain finish to the fittings. Now, that sounds like it's kind of a no-brainer, but the reality is that many times the drain will not come with the shower or the tub, and if that happens, then you need to order it, and you want to be sure you order the right finish. There are a lot of finishes that are very close in appearance today. Let's be sure we get the right one. So the consumers decided to turn their existing shower into a 2-person luxury shower. So we know we have to do a little math. According to the International Residential Code, the IRC, and we're using the current edition. By the way, I'm sure many of you are aware that the NKBA planning guidelines use the IRC as a basis for code issues. According to the IRC, a bathtub with or without a shower head or whirlpool attachment requires an 1.5 inch drain. Now, a lot of people have said they don't understand why a shower alone requires a 2-inch drain when a bathtub with shower would only require a 1/2 inch drain. Well, actually, it is a 1.5 inch drain if you're using 5.7 gallons per minute or less. Let me enlarge that so you can see it a little bit better. Again, if the flow rate for all of the body spray, shower heads, handheld, everything else is less than 5.7 gallons per minute, that 1.5-inch drain is okay. So taking a standard tub out, replacing it then with maybe a 2-person shower, you're going to be all right until you start adding these shower heads. Now let's take a look at a combination we have down here, 4 body sprays. Now these actually put out 2.2 gallons per minute per spray for a combined 8.8 gallons per minute. 2 shower heads that could be running at the same time. We assume that the maximum water would be used, 2.5 by code. That gives us a total of 5 gallons per minute. We add to that a handheld that might be running at the same time, and we have a combined total then for all of the fittings in the shower at 16.3. That means we have to have a 3-inch drain. So we just jumped from the bathtub drain to what we would need for the typical toilet. Now the problem there is we cannot run perpendicular to floor joists. You better hope you have floor trusses in that home. Of course, buried in a concrete slab, it even gets worse than that. But let's say you do have floor joists. Let's say your floor joist is a 2x10. Well, a 2x10 is actually 9 1/4. And the code says that the hole can be no more than 1/3 the size of the joist. Therefore, the PVC outside diameter, 3.5, would be more than 1/3 of the height of that joist. So we would have to run parallel to the joist. Not only that, we cannot make any holes within the center third for structural reasons, obviously. So think about this when you're relocating that shower and you're adding all of these body sprays. Well, let's talk about these multiple shower heads that we may have. Make sure all sprays and shower components are connected. Now, I was a little leery about adding this onto my list until I kept seeing it pop up over and over and over again. You see, the manufacturer will give you a suggestion on how you might lay out the body sprays, and in this case, a single shower head. Now, over to the right is not what we see to the left, so I don't want to throw you off. But in this particular case, same manufacturer. So they have a suggested then location for the body sprays and a suggested hookup. You see how the water is kind of going in at different places, so we don't have all of the water pressure at one particular body spray. We want to have a high volume valve so it'll handle all of the water coming in and get it distributed out evenly. But more than once I saw coming in for my survey that people forgot to make a connection in one of these. Maybe it was nothing more than this was simply not connected. Or something, when something was turned off, other things were turned off at the same time. So we see in this case that the body spray is turned on and off at this location, and then the standard valve is handling then the handheld and also the other. Now the handheld would have a valve to turn it on and off separate from the main valve. But as you can see, following the hookup is very important. And I did want to go ahead and mention that because it was discussed a couple times. We would think that this is not something that somebody would miss. Change shower valves. Now this brought up an interesting point, and it covered 2 different areas here. More than once I heard that when you start ripping the interior of that shower out to replace the surround, it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and replace that older tub shower valve. Now we know by code, if it's tub shower or shower only, it has to be pressure balanced, temperature limiting, or a combination of both. Well, I have one in my basement right now that no longer works. I've used it very little, and that may be the problem with it. So I'm going to have to go back in and fix it, which some might be able to be fixed from the front or replace it, which gets into a big deal. Now, when you replace it, keep in mind, if you don't replace it, the valve, a replacement trim, remember I said we want to match our finish. So a replacement trim may not fit it, or the valve may be worn out and you got to replace the thing anyway. And keep in mind that when you get into bathrooms and you start tearing the walls out and doing some major work within that bathroom, if that shower has two handles, when you leave, by code, it may have to have a pressure balance, temperature limiting, or the combination to meet the code. So let's talk about those issues at this point. I want you to notice, and again, this is required by code for tub shower, and you can see that it is a tub shower combination. Notice that all of the connection is made on the inside of the bathtub area, not from the back side. That means that if this had to be repaired, you'd have to do it from the inside of the tub area. Well, that means when you start making major repairs, and this was a bathroom remodel, we actually had a replacement liner placed over this bathtub, and then of course the tile went up after that. But since we were tearing everything out of the original bathtub, now's the time to replace that valve, and that's exactly what we did. In fact, the other one was two-handled, so we had to do it anyway. But now's the time. So not only replace an existing two-handled one, but also you want to replace the actual valve if it has much age on it. A lot of changes have been made, and this may be a good time to change that finish at the same time. Now, if you do encounter the two-handled unit, then it is possible to go through the shower side of the wall to make then the swap out. And to patch everything up, a rather large escutcheon plate can go back in. So sometimes we don't have to tear the entire wall out, and some of that can be done from the inside of the shower. That'll save a lot of labor and a lot of time in putting new wall material back up if what they have is in good shape. But remember, this is required by code. This is no longer permitted. So if you get into that wall, now's a good time to make the change. We don't have to rip the entire wall out to do it. Bathtubs. When we get into bathtubs, some points that were made from the people supplying me with information. Order the tub with the correct drain location. We get so focused sometimes on making sure we have the right color, the right finishes, and the right style that we forget to specify left or right. Very simple mistake. And if it comes in the wrong place, it's going to be a very expensive and time-consuming project to get it back again, particularly if it was special order. Then we've got a tub that, well, and within the next couple of weeks, you'll probably sell that $8,000 custom-ordered bathtub. I'm sure there's somebody just waiting to buy it, particularly with the drain location where it is. This is how our back rooms get filled up sometimes. The drains and jet trim may not be included, so you want to be sure that you order that. In fact, the overflow for bathtubs and the drains are some of the most often people fail to order the overflow and the drain more than about anything else when they're working in the bathtub, so it can happen. Verify the tub dimensions. Now, you and I know that the homeowner is going to measure the outside of the bathtub. Well, the outside of the bathtub is from tile to tile or stone to stone, whatever the wall covering may be. I want to know what the stud to stud dimension is. And generally, it's going to be about 60 inches. And, of course, the bathtub itself, by the time we get the cement board or the old green board on, we've got maybe a 58.5-inch dimension. So make sure that the dimension is accurate because you're going to tear all of that out anyway. A point here. When that bathtub arrives on the job site, and this is coming from a plumbing wholesaler, open it up and look for damage right then and there. If there's no damage, then make sure it's in a secure area where it can't be damaged. But once you open that box and there's damage there, and this is something that needs to be put in tomorrow, then it's too late to reorder. So check that damage. And again, that's not coming from a designer. That's coming from somebody that supplies a bathtub to you. Check framing for tub support. We'll get into that. Some of your designs may not be able to be supported by the existing framing. And finally, of course, if you know that it has a whirlpool attachment or requires electricity in either way, make sure you have enough service in the panel to supply that, because more than likely it's going to be a dedicated circuit. Now, of course, in this particular case, we're looking at the drain on the left. So this would be a left drain tub. If we were ordering this, you can see the reason that we need to think about it. But just because it shows up like this on the plan, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the best solution for the client. I would see people come into my showroom on a fairly regular basis with their children. And let's say that they walk into your showroom. One is holding maybe an 18-month-old in their arms while they're holding one by the hand that might be about 5 or 6. And there's another one there that's about 8 years old. This is the hall bath on their plan for the new home that they are having built. I look at this and I say, is this where you plan on bathing the children for the next few years? Hall bath? And of course the answer is usually yes. And then my statement would be, don't you think it's going to be difficult to get to the controls with the toilet in the way? Have you talked to the contractor about flipping that bathtub? Rather than ordering a left, order a right. Now, those of you that have had a plumbing class with me, you've already figured out that that wall is thicker than this wall. You know that this is a wet wall. And we see that it is wider so that we can get that 3 or 4 inch vent stack in that stud wall using 2x6s. And because the plumber is going to want to do things the easiest way, and that's not by any means a slam on plumbers. I do the same thing. But the plumber is going to be there for a few hours. That couple with those 3 small children are going to be using this bathroom for a long time. Now, all I have to do is change the location early on that plan. And whether it's a concrete slab or whatever it is, as long as the plumbing has not been roughed in, we can put it on the other wall. I don't have to have a vent stack this large on the opposite wall. An 1.5 inch vent stack would be fine for this. All it has to do is move air to the outside of the house. Now, when I would mention things like this, occasionally the homeowner would say, you know, I've been a couple other places, and nobody's mentioned that. I think that's a great idea. Well, about the 3rd time they say that they've heard something from you they haven't heard from anybody else, it's time to say, well, apparently you found the place you want to buy your kitchen and bath products, because they have. Use that opportunity to sell yourself at that time. But look for these things. That bathtub doesn't cost any more one way or the other, and if the plumber is being paid per fixture, then the cost is no more. Now, the plumber probably wouldn't like me saying that, because they will have a little more invested in the pipe, but the consumer is the one I'm worried about, unless I'm working for the plumber. Let's talk about the weight. This happens a lot, and sometimes we don't think about it. And I think this is the reason that our certification programs are so important through NKBA. Because as kitchen and bath designers, NKBA feels you need to know more than just the design aspects. When you start designing something, we want to be sure that we don't do anything in that home that would hurt the value of that home by not specifying the right products. And we certainly don't want to do anything that would make that home less safe than when we went in. It's one of those areas that can happen without thinking. In the existing home, we have an 88-pound tub shower combination unit. Now, that's the shipping weight, so you take the packing material off, it'd probably be less than that. We know it's a 1-person acrylic bathtub, and it's in the upper level of the home that typically is rated at 30 pounds per square foot in that area of the home. The living part, usually we'll see that as 40 pounds per square foot, and fortunately some builders don't worry about the difference. They build it all 40 pounds. But let's say we have 30 pound. If you want to use 40, that's fine for me because it's not going to make any difference when I go to the next slide. Let's say they want to replace that bathtub in the bathroom with a Kohler bathtub in this illustration. That tub weighs 404 pounds. It's a two-person. We would expect it then it would probably be used by two people. It takes up 36 by 72 plus now the surround itself. So this is a bathtub. Now, if you look at water, 8.33 pounds per gallon, multiply it by 60, that's almost 500 pounds, 499 and change. Now, it'll hold 89 gallons, but I figure if you put two people in, we wouldn't want the tub full, so I'm being safe with 60 gallons. An average North American male is about 182 pounds, while the female is about 149. You add all the weight up, you're at 1,234 pounds. Total weight, less the surround, because we'd have to add that in too. Not knowing what it is, then it would be a little difficult. So you can see that if it's stone, if it's marble, if it's laminate, then that could vary a little bit. But right now, we know we're going into this with 1,234 pounds. Now, the unit requires 18 square feet of space. Simple math. 3 times 6, 18. So if we divide the 1,234 pounds by 18 square feet, we end up with 68.5 pounds per square foot. In that particular case, you can see that we're twice over the original weight of the fixture. Now, if they built with the 40 pounds per square foot, we might be all right. Now, here's a quote then from another person, Debbie Johnson, from Modern Supply, giving me a tip. She says, we see contractors and customers, who will try to force a tub into a smaller space or force it through framing and end up damaging the bathtub. Again, these items go in very early. When you're making a decision on a bathtub on an upper level of the home, around a corner through a tight door, you can see that we want to get something that's light enough to move into those areas. But we need to measure first and make sure that we can get it in. Good tip. We did mention the electrical requirements. On the right, you see a 200 amp panel that is stuffed. There are no circuits available on this panel to be added. No breakers could be added. Now, I know this panel personally. This is in my home. I've got a 2-bedroom home. The panel is stuffed. It is all electric. But I am not using anywhere near the electrical capacity. I'm using the panel capacity, simply the size of the breakers. But I could put a sub-panel in, so I know I could do that. On the left, we see an example. This is out of the Kitchen and Bath Systems PRL manual that NKBA has, and we can see that there are 3 slots available. Now, I could use one slot if I know that this whirlpool requires 120 volt. Most of the time, it would be a dedicated circuit. So going from this slot on the left to that whirlpool, direct shot, that would work for me. If it's 240 volt, I would need to add 2 of these slots together. So either way, with this panel, it could be added easily. Don't add the breakers up to come up with 200 amps or whatever the size of the panel is. It doesn't work that way. And the electrician can tell you if adding that is going to overpower the panel. And I'm sure that if I ask the electrician, oh no, you got so many light circuits on different circuits, and I did that on purpose. If one set of lights goes out before I can get a breaker fixed, then I've got other lights within that space. So do check that panel to see if you do have the enough electricity. To put a new panel in, it could cost $2,000. To put a breaker in, it's not that much. As far as the toilet is concerned, we had several things here. Verify the toilet rough-in. Leave room for the toilet. When replacing toilets, check the depth of the toilet. You're going from a standard toilet to an elongated bowl. That can create a problem. You got a question here that somebody just put in. Yeah, I see then, bring my attention. It's good. How can you decide what the wattage voltage on the panel? It's a good question. Let me back up. I can do that with this one. Right up here at the top, you will have a main breaker. Got one right over here. If we could zoom in on that close enough, you'd see that that says 200 amp. And again, don't add the breakers up because each breaker will have an amp rating. And I'll guarantee you this is well over 200. So you're not adding you're not adding the amperage of the breakers up to see if it equals 200 or less. The main thing we have to worry about as kitchen designer, do you physically have the room? It's very difficult to overload one of these unless every single one of these happen to be for maybe a 50 amp heating unit in every single room. But that's how you would determine the panel size. But the most important thing is simply, do you have room, physical room in that panel? And I appreciate, Al, you asking that. If you do have a question, please ask. And by him hitting the hand button, I know to look in that direction. I just happened to look just before he did. I appreciate Lisa's picking up a lot of those for me. They had to do with technical issues more than what I'm doing, but I do appreciate that. It's like controlling traffic at O'Hare International Airport with trying to read all the messages and everything else at the same time. All right, let's take a look at these toilet issues. First of all, toilets come with a rough end of 10, 12, or 14. Now, 12 is the most popular. That's why I'm showing it here. Now, what that means is from this back wall to the center line of the closet flange, that is 12 inches. Now, you may find some that are 10. There are some that are 14. Most of them are 12. Here's where you get in trouble. You failed to measure the client's existing toilet. To measure the client's existing toilet, I'm going to measure from the hold-down bolt, which is what comes out of the center of the closet flange, to the back wall. Now, this is a finished back wall, so you know it's going to be less than 10 if it's a 10-inch, less than 12 if it's a 12-inch, and less than 14. But it's not going to be less a great deal. So you can figure that if it's like 11 and a half, you got a 12-inch rough end, unless something really funny is going on in that wall. But again, this is one of the things that you want to measure before you order the toilet. Now, it's very possible, and in some of the more popular toilets, the Cadet, American Standard, the Wellworth, Kohler, they do have 10 and 12 versions of this toilet. Same toilet, two different rough ends, so that'll save you. But when you get into some of the more expensive ones, if there is a set rough end, you better check it every time anyway. Now, here's what happens. Here's our stud wall. Here's our drywall. Unless you tell the plumber otherwise, that will be at 12 inches for that toilet. But you failed to tell the plumber you're putting ceramic tile in on top of whatever the wall material is that the plumber's factored in. And stone might be a little thicker than the tile, and a wood beaded board might even be more than that. So all of a sudden, that toilet will not fit. Now, I've seen lots of times where the plumber puts it in, you're standing there hoping it'll fit, and it did, and you think, thank goodness. And the plumber said, yeah, but the lid's not going to go on because the lid overhangs the tank. Now, here's a quick fix if your code will allow it. It is called an offset flange, and it can be twisted around as well as straight front and back. So this will get you out of a little bit of trouble if the code will permit it. So rather than the waist dropping straight down, it's going to come down and then move off in one direction. So check with your code, and that might be an easy save for you. Offset flange, there's a manufacturer for it right there, or simply do a search on the web for offset flange. That's going to replace what we see right here, all right? Now, here's something else that we run into. We'll go in, we see where the plumbing is, we'll assume the plumber has centerlined then the plumbing with the vanity. Not so fast. The plumber actually put it here to keep from probably going over a little bit further or going through an additional stud. So in this particular case, what you need to do is you need to measure from the center of the drain for the toilet to the left 15 inches. The code says that has to be 15 inches minimum. So rather than relying on the rough end of the plumbing, you need to rely on making sure the toilet fits in there, because we can always get a smaller vanity, but we may not be able to get the toilet in the required space. Got a question? I'll pick that up in just a second. Looking right here once again, you measure this and you may say a 30-inch vanity works. So you order a 30-inch vanity. Unfortunately, it sticks out here another 3 inches, leaving 12 inches for the toilet, which is a violation of the code. What the plumber may have thought is a 3-inch filler, a 24-inch vanity, that puts you 15 inches away from a vertical surface, which you have to have, but I don't have to have 15 inches from the center of a lav to an open area. Again, you want to make sure you have room for the toilet, and then you back up and get your vanity size. Here's a question now. It says, did you say the 12 inches center line dimension on toilet should be measured from the face of the final rear wall finish or the rear studding? Again, I'm not that far that I can't back up. It is actually determined, because again, this is being roughed in when the stud wall is there. So it's determined off of that stud wall, so the 12-inch rough end. But you see, the plumber is assuming that you're going to use half-inch drywall unless you tell them otherwise. So it's your responsibility then to tell them if you're adding anything in addition to the half-inch. If you are, then whatever the thickness of the cement board is, the board that you're adding on, that you're going to add the thicker stone to, or the wood over the drywall. That's your responsibility to cover that. I appreciate you asking. I'm always glad to make sure you understand it, because that's a very common mistake. By the way, that one was one we had 20 years ago. That one just doesn't go away. We keep making that mistake. Watch elongated bowls. I took this illustration straight out of the NKBA planning guidelines. This is a code issue. Doors cannot interfere with fixtures. It happens a lot. We failed to measure the door clearance on that existing round 27.5-inch deep bowl or toilet that ends up being 27.5 inches deep. We put an elongated toilet in, the door will not close. It's 10 o'clock at night when the homeowner got through. They're not real happy because you didn't mention this. Another mistake made by the do-it-yourselfer, but we make that mistake too, is kitchen and bath designers. So make sure that the door will open. That is a code issue. Here's another issue you need to be careful of. The homeowner wants to swap out their existing closed couple or two-piece toilet with a low-profile one-piece toilet. Notice where, and this is straight from American Standard, notice where the rough end is for the valve or stop where the supply will be connected to the tank. Notice where it's suggested. If you follow that right across to the new location, you realize that it's much lower. That means that that stop has to be lowered on the wall. Now, sometimes it has to be increased in size slightly. That's not the problem. It's that this customer has on the wall marble that has been there for 40 years. And you're going to try to get that stop lowered down. Now, you might be okay. Maybe the new toilet's going to cover up the old hole. You might get away with that, but it does have to be lowered. So be very careful when you're swapping existing toilets for low-profile one-piece toilets. Electricity. Who would think we need to check to have electricity near a toilet? This item by Kohler, a fairly new one, does require electricity for part of the flushing action. This Toto actually has a bidet attachment that requires electricity. So we are seeing, in fact, it's in our planning guidelines, it's not a bad idea to locate a receptacle near a toilet. You might want to put an add-on feature onto an existing toilet that requires electricity. And codes are not real excited about running extension cords in bathrooms. So you might want to think about that, future plans for a client at a later date. Electricity for the toilet, who would think? And of course it does have to be GFCI. Sinks. Well, we have rim issues with vessels, faucet height issues, handle heights also. And then, of course, ordering the drain and check for special sizes. Undermount sinks can create a problem in the wrong cabinet size. In drop-in and rim sinks versus cabinet top depth. Let's take a look at these individually. If we use an existing vanity that gives us a finished counter height of about 34.5 inches, the bowl is way too high. Most people would not be able to use it comfortably. So here's a way to think about it. Think about the height of the bowl should maybe be at about 34.5 inches high. Deduct the thickness of the bowl, then consider that as the height for the vanity. Now we know that NKBA calls for varied vanity heights, but here's a good way to figure that out is that deduct the bowl. If it's 6 inches, you can knock about 6 inches off, 4 inches, and so forth. So what do we have at these odd heights? Well, there's one that's mounted on the wall. Put that pretty well anywhere you want it. This almost comes out as the look of a piece of furniture. Had to, we'd get out the old chainsaw and cut the legs of this off, couldn't we? But do consider that that is an issue. Also, think about the faucets. Now, you want to be sure that the trajectory of the water, as the water comes out, it doesn't splash out of the bowl. All of that's important in your calculation. Also, we want to be sure that any of your bowls that the client has chosen, but because of door clearance, you're going to have to use a little bit smaller vanity. Will that bigger bowl fit in that smaller vanity size? And I'm talking about 1 to 2 inches will throw you off, so be careful with that. As far as faucets are concerned, the faucet spread, it varies. And I'll run through this with the time remaining with the illustrations to finish this out. We've got a lot of different spreads, no question about it. Some are very flexible, some are set at other widths. So when you start picking out the bowls that have the holes in them, you want to be sure that if you're working with a 4-inch spread on the bowl, you get 4-inch spread for your faucet. 8-inch for 8-inch. So your final project is correct. And it's a very common mistake that's made. This is particularly important for those of you working in home centers and lumber yards in helping the people select things. At the same time, those of you that are independent designers that don't have a showroom, you're going to have to remember this. You may have to go to some of these locations with them to make sure they don't get the wrong thing. Now we know right within that lumberyard home center we may have pre-made solid surface cultured marble tops. The same is true here. However, when you start having one fabricated, remember, and this is the beginning of a cultured marble top, that has to be blocked in advance. And unless you tell them otherwise, they're probably putting these for 3-inch spreads or 4-inch or whatever we may have. Whatever the standard is for them, that's what they're going to use. So you can see it's very easy to change this, but they have to know ahead of time. By the way, with your faucet, higher faucets, watch these mirrors that are not recessed into the wall. They're going to create a real problem for you. And finally, with a finish, make sure that all the fittings match the other parts of the plumbing. Here we see the P-trap, the tailpiece, all of that needs to match when you're working with pedestal lab and some of the open base vanities that we have, or labs that we have. This was one of our design winners for last year's design competition, the powder room category. Even the grab bar around the mirror, the wall sconces, all of that needed to match. And by the way, this is a waste basket hanging on the grab bar with a toilet paper holder. I want to go on the NKBA website. If you haven't seen that, it's there. Powder room category last year, the winner, the whole bath was the powder room. This is a powder room. 2 fixtures, you see them. The whole thing was designed around a picture of women bathing. Incredible what NKBA designers can do. And I'll finish with this bathtub. Even the feet need to match. And of course, with this kind of a bathtub, all of the plumbing shows anyway. I do appreciate you attending this. We've got a lot of people here. There wasn't a lot of time for questions. I certainly appreciated the ones I got. They were important. I want to be sure I cover things. I'm willing to stay here as long as I can. Lisa, I'll leave that up to you. You tell me how long we can stay on. So if anybody does have a question and I can control the screen, I'm willing to stay until you tell me I got to leave.
Great. Thanks, David. I'm just looking to send everyone an update with a Zoomerang survey. So if you would just all fill that out, and we'll make sure that you earn your CEU credits. All right, and thank you all. Have a great day.
And thanks again. If you have a question, just hit the hand button. I'll see if I can answer that. Otherwise, you have a great weekend, and let us know if there's more of these that we can, more programs that we can deliver for you. I've got a question here. Do you have suggestions on, and let me slide this up here a second. Do you have suggestions for, and every time somebody leaves, I lose that screen, so just a second. You have suggestions for working with plumbers on setting wall valves. Almost got it. Setting wall valves so you don't need extensions on the end. I think that not being a plumber, I think that ends up at what point do you get involved in the process, and what suggestions is a plumber going to give you? If you can catch it at this point, this is what I can do for you. I'm not that sure about what your question is, but it sounds like one of those that would work out very well by going to the plumber and asking the plumber this question, and then I think they can give you a better answer. If you can't get that, I'll do a little research on that. You send me that question to the email address I gave you, and I'll see what I can do with that.